We've worked our whole lives, saved and invested just to achieve financial freedom, and been led to believe that instead of painting the perfect financial picture, everyone's plan is the same. But the truth is, no one is like you, and you deserve a financial strategy just as unique as you are. How do you navigate the complexities and volatility of a financial environment that just never sits still? And how do you find the guidance you need? Who do you trust with the wisdom to paint your financial masterpiece? You've arrived. This is the Wealth Council. Thanks so much for joining us on the Wealth Council. I'm Brad Johansson. I want to talk about a revolution today to start our program. There are a lot of people who believe that healthcare costs are probably the single most expensive things that they're going to deal with in retirement. We say maybe not so much. Let's talk about the taxation revolution with independent advisors from around the country. Jay Hagee joins us from Tennessee. Nice to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Christina Ping-Kepperling out of Kentucky. And out of New Jersey, John Papa.
Yes, sir.
Nice to have you all here. John, I'm going to start with you. If I'm kind of teasing into a revolution, why would I believe that taxation is probably the most expensive thing that we're dealing with rather than the healthcare costs that people usually think about?
Well, yeah, Brad, when you run the numbers and put a number to it and not just a conversation about it, clients can realize that these costs are astronomical.
So you've got people coming into the office
people
like
coming
this?
in. I'll give you a quick example of what taxation is going to look like for a retiree, 65-year-old person with $1 million in his IRA, not planning on touching it to 73 when the required minimum distributions start, right? That person, we can calculate, will take $2.2 million in required minimum distributions if you project out to 90, okay? 2.2 million he's going to take out
over a 25-year period.
Over a 25-year period, because life expectancies are getting longer, and there's an 85% chance a married couple, someone's living to 90, right? So they're going to take out $2.2 million, pay taxes on it, and there's still $2 million left in the plan that's going to go to their kids and grandkids that they have to pay taxes on. So $1 million IRA for a 65-year-old person, family will pay taxes on $4.2 million in distributions. You want to say we're at 30% tax bracket? That tax bill to that family, $1.3 million. A 40% tax bracket, because we don't know where tax rates are going.
That's it.
Everyone thinks they're going higher, right?
Yeah.
If it's a 40% tax, it's $1.7 million in taxes. That's more than the IRA even started out with.
Yeah, so Christina has a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
and we run numbers all the time, but we don't talk about taxes a lot in preparation for retirement. We got a number, but we don't realize that that's not all ours.
It is not all ours. That first time that you earn your paycheck and you see what happens, you know, welcome to FICA. And that paycheck is so much less. Well, you think about that. A lot of folks are coming in and they're telling me, I don't think that my taxes are going to be that high in retirement. It's okay, I'll be in a lower bracket. That's not true, not necessarily. And a lot of people don't even understand that Social Security is taxed as well. So when we're talking about taxation, and I really love the way that John was giving an exact calculation of what happens, well, lead into that for a moment. You just left a tax burden in your legacy as well. That is such a big deal. I think about my children and grandchildren. I definitely don't want to leave a tax burden on them. Where are taxes going to be when they come along?
Jay, what do you see as the biggest part of this revolution? Is it that we don't understand that we're in the middle of it?
No, I think it really is that we don't understand how much we're going to have to pay in taxes in the future, like John talked about earlier. I think we all have a lot of tax-deferred funds, whether that's IRAs, 401ks. The latest number I saw was $38.4 trillion. And so we have a debt problem in America.
35 trillion.
And so that is only going to be solved in one of two ways: less spending or more taxation. And so we have tax-deferred accounts that we have to pull an undisclosed amount at an unknown time, because that, with the Secure Act, it's always changing, right? At an unknown rate in the future. And so I believe we just don't make that a big enough a part of our plan to understand taxes will probably end up costing you more than healthcare will because of how your funds are positioned right now in tax-deferred accounts.
We talk about this, that a lot of people are going into advisors and maybe coming into all of you for a second opinion, and taxation becomes the biggest forefront of the conversation. And you get the eyes from people who are saying, nobody ever talked to me about taxes in my plan. Why?
Well, because when they go to the 401k meeting and the 403B meeting at their work, they're not told about this stuff. We're not told about the rules at the end. All they're told about is to say, hey, save as much money as you can, get a current year tax deduction. But you don't know what the costs are going to be on the way out. No one calculates that in. So we're dealing with people who are in their 50s, 55, 60 years old. They're getting closer to retirement. Now they have this $1 million IRA, and what are we going to do about it?
Okay, so I get a problem that says I got to pay taxes, Christina. How are you going to solve my problem? If I've got to pay them, it doesn't matter. You're telling me that putting together a plan now, especially in where we are in tax brackets at this point, can actually solve part of that tax problem?
If you're not talking about taxes and fees and the liquidity of the plan, the legacy part of the plan, inflation, all of these different items inside of the plan, what is the timing on Social Security? What happens with Social Security taxation? If you don't have all of those things together in a holistic approach, you don't even have a plan.
Jay, give me an idea about why December of 2025 is so important to all
Well,
of
the
us.
Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 sunsets at the end of 2025. We're under the third most advantageous time in history of how we can be taxed on our dollars. So if you don't have a plan going forward, we don't know what the tax rate's going to be after 2025. So we really now is still a small window where we're meeting with people and saying, hey, this year, next year, we know what that rate's going to be. Maybe Roth conversions or something like this is good for you. And we could do a whole segment just on Roth conversions. But we want to make sure that folks have a tax plan because we want that number one fear that retirees have of running out of money to not come true. And a lot of that has to do on how much do I owe Uncle Sam in these accounts that I've partnered with him on.
Yeah, obviously at this time, this becomes when I talk about a tax revolution and that most people believe that healthcare, and that's a down the road type of thing, we have a now type of thing that we've got to focus on.
Well, yeah, we only have 1 year left, right? And the current administration is actually advertising that they're going to let those tax rates expire. They're going to let those tax breaks that we have now expire. They're bragging about it. And so tax rates are going up. If you're not having a conversation with your accountant and your CPA and your financial advisor about what are we going to do now to try and reduce the taxes on these qualified plans, because Brad, everybody's biggest asset besides their house is pretty much a qualified plan. That's who we're seeing, right? So everyone's coming in with a large amount of money in a tax-deferred account with no plan. And the closer you get to 73, the less you can do a Roth conversion and try some strategies to get out of that.
So this may be a question for you. Do you have an advisor that's talking to you about the tax revolution? Do you know what the rules are right now? Have you been told what they're going to be in the future? Nobody knows at this point. So why don't you play with the rules that you have now? And if you haven't had anybody talk to you about this, maybe you need a second opinion. Maybe the Wealth Council can help with a plan that helps with your tax revolution. Call the number on your screen right now. Click the QR code. Let us help you put a plan together. Because if you're not thinking about it right now, ignorance is an excuse. Dial the number on your screen. Click the QR code. Let the Wealth Council help. We'll return after this.
Think of how much you've saved in your 401k, 403b, or TSP retirement accounts, okay? You have that number? Great. Now, subtract 20 to 30% from that number for taxes. That's how much you actually have saved. Call the Wealth Council at 844-463-3466 right now for your free retirement tax guide. Your 2024 tax guide is free for the viewers of the Wealth Council, so call now, 844-463-3466, or scan the QR code below from your smartphone camera.
Welcome back to the Wealth Council. I'm Brad Johansson. We are in an election year. I don't know whether you knew that, but it's going to continue for the rest of the year. And for a lot of you, you're terrified about what that's going to do to your retirement plan and beyond. Joining me, a couple of independent advisors from around the country to talk about election hype and whether or not it's actually reality. Derek Colton out of Oklahoma, Tom Mosley out of California. Gentlemen, I'm going to tell you, as we look at articles, shoot, past and present, that take us up to right now. 1 out of every 3 Americans believes that if the person that they do not support gets into office, we are going to be plunged into disaster in the stock market, financially, and beyond. How real is that, Tom?
It's not very real if you look at history. If you look at the news, it's very real, okay?
We'll be told that consistently.
That's exactly right, because it seems there's no straightforward, straight across the board news. It either leans one way or the other way, and people tend to watch the news that leans their way.
Sure.
And they think, well, if our guy wins, we're great. If our guy doesn't win, it's to hell in a handbasket type thing, and we're going down the tubes. I mean,
you've seen, Derek, presidential. I mean, you can run the history of presidential elections.
Right.
What's it say for us going back decades?
Brad, it says absolutely nothing. I mean, you've got Democratic presidents under whom the market has done well, some that did poorly. The same with Republicans. Yet I get people in my office all the time, and so do you, Tom, that yes, are terrified that if so-and-so wins, the market's going to fall apart. Well, maybe, but even if it does, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the election. So, you know, my dad used to say, don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. And I think, you know, that's the case when we're listening to these 24-hour news stations. It's you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Okay, if we're taking it with a grain of salt, and we are in an election year, and we are in chaos that for many of us in our lifetime we haven't seen before, in as far as divisiveness between the way people think and where we're going. If we're dealing with reality and we're prepping for something that comes in November financially, what's the solution to ignoring some of the hype, Tom?
well, I learned in the first grade.
Oh, you're going way back.
Yeah, I really am. I learned in the first grade when I got on a bus, and I thought that the guy that my dad liked had won the election the night when we went to sleep, and we didn't watch the news in the morning. And overnight, it had shifted until the other guy had won the presidential election. And I got on the bus to ride to school, and I went to the back, and all the big kids were in the back. And I got to sit with the big kids. And the big kids, I said, well, so-and-so won the election. And they said, no, they didn't. The other guy won. And I remember I was so defeated because our guy didn't win. You know what I found out? Like we talked about, it doesn't matter who wins. But here's what does matter. Whoever wins, what are you going to do about it? Congress changes, the regulation changes. Do you have a plan that's built not just for now, but is built for changing to adapt to whatever the landscape is when it comes to all of those things, Social Security, taxes, all of those things?
How do we create a plan, Derek, that doesn't hinge on Democrat or Republican?
Well, a plan has, number one, it's got to be written. It's got to be definitive. It's not, if it's guesswork, you know, if we're just hoping for the best, that's not a plan. So a plan has to actually be a plan. It's got to be something that we sit down, and that's what we do as retirement planners. We put together plans that are as bulletproof as we can make them. We don't know what's going to happen, but inside that plan, you have to be prepared for anything that may happen. And that's what happens when you put a real plan together.
So the question is, what kind of plan have you put together? Have you actually talked to an advisor who has worked into this and not somebody who's listening to the hype? Look, we understand that we're 35 trillion plus in debt as a government, and tax deferred accounts more than 38 trillion. Where do you think the government's going, Republican or Democrat? They're going for people who have the money. Is that you? Do you have a plan to save your own money? Call the number on your screen. Reach out to an independent advisor to put together a plan that is hype-free. Call the number. The Wealth Council continues after this.
Are you preparing to make your retirement funds work for you while not taking too much risk? While there is no substitute for sitting down with an independent financial advisor, why don't you learn the strategies of investing as well? Call for your free retirement investing guide from the Wealth Council right now to learn about investment strategies that align with your goals. Call for your free retirement investing guide from the Wealth Council right now. 844-463-3466. That's 844-463-3466.
Welcome back to the Wealth Council. Brad Johansson with Advisor Spotlight. Ryan Wheelis out of Texas. Man, we're so glad you're in the business now, but what a ride you had. This wasn't anywhere near what you intended when you started out. Take me back.
So it's not, and it's far from where I started in life. I moved to Houston, Texas in 1998. I had $200 in my checking account and a U-Haul truck half full of used furniture. And I was moving to Houston to go to flight school. And Brad, I wasn't the best high school student by any means, never made good grades. Got to flight school and greatly excelled. I loved it. I loved aviation.
This was it.
Passionate about it. I was the guy that showed up early to class, left late, was always at the airport waiting for other flight lessons to cancel so I could get in and get my ratings done and move up the ladder in the aviation business very fast. And was on a good path. And then in 2001, we had the terrorist attacks. And I never will forget that day. I was actually flying and they shut the aviation system down. The towers wouldn't let you take off. You couldn't do anything. And so we went into the pilot's lounge at the airport there at where I was flying that day. And everybody who had a pilot's license in that airport was facing the TV. We saw the smoldering of the first plane that had already hit the building. And then we saw the second plane hit the second building. And every single one of us knew something was really, really wrong. So as the buildings crumbled, you could see it was synonymous with the aviation industry crumbling. And so I found myself in a situation to where I was strapped with $100,000 in student debt and no prospects of a job. In fact, the flight school that I worked at, they eventually had to lay me off because there was no more students coming in. And the flight instructor job was no good because for $12 an hour, you're trying to keep the student from killing you as a flight instructor. So I was shown an opportunity to get into the mortgage and real estate business. And if you remember the boom that kind of happened after that, after 2002 in the real estate market, it was really cool because we had both a mortgage brokerage and a real estate salesperson's license. And we were combining the ability to sell a home and finance the home. And we were doing really, really well. Well, lo and behold, as 2006 and 2007 started to approach, we started seeing our loan programs go away. So we were not able to sell as many houses because we could not get people financed. And I could start to see the writing on the wall. And I was shown the insurance industry, primarily focusing on annuities by a friend. And as a hedge against what happened to me in the aviation industry, I got an insurance license. And so the insurance license allowed me to sell products called fixed index annuities. And those annuities allow people to make money when the stock market goes up and not lose money when the market goes down. And so I got out of the real estate and mortgage business and got into the insurance business. And about 2007, I really started in the business. And I'd had a good year. My first year out was really good. And what was awesome is when 2008 hit, my clients that were in these products did not lose one dime of their money.
And you knew you'd found it.
I knew I'd found it because I experienced great loss with the aviation part of my life, not being able to have that dream unfold. The same devastation occurred in my real estate career, having to pivot again. And now I found an area where it was so awesome when people were calling my office going, "Oh my God, the market's crashing, I'm gonna lose so much money." I'm like, no, you're not gonna lose any money at all because we protected your retirement savings from a market crash. And it was the most awesome thing in the world, Brad. So we went on to understand that we can't just do everything for someone's retirement plan in annuities. We have to be a full service firm. So we founded it ourselves as a registered investment advisory firm with a fiduciary duty to our clients, January 22nd, 2008, and have been doing that business and helping people protect their retirement ever since.
Not the path we would have thought, but we're glad you found your way.
Pretty awesome.
Brian, thanks. Wealth Counsel returns after this.
Think of how much you've saved in your 401k, 403b, or TSP retirement accounts, okay? You have that number? Great. Now, subtract 20 to 30% from that number for taxes. That's how much you actually have saved. Call the Wealth Counsel at 844-463-3466 right now for your free retirement tax guide. Your 2024 tax guide is free for the viewers of the Wealth Counsel, so call now, 844-463-3466, or scan the QR code below from your smartphone camera.
Welcome back to the Wealth Counsel. I'm Brad Johansson. Let's play a little game, shall we? How about retirement roulette? Are you in? I mean, what's your tolerance? Because it's roulette. It's easy to win, right? I mean, maybe you define yourself as aggressive, Maybe you're moderate. Maybe you're moderate aggressive, or maybe you're conservative or moderate conservative. Do you have any idea what those terms mean? I've got a couple of advisors joining me now, independent advisors from around the country who may be able to help us out with this game of roulette. Tom Mosley out of California, Kristen Taylor out of Ohio. What do any of those terms mean? Because they're placed on people when you're given, what, a number or an advice from an advisor?
Well, you know, it's funny, is I attempted to play roulette once. The only time I've ever tried to gamble.
Did you win?
I did not win. I put $20 down and it was gone like that, you know, in a snap of a finger. And I didn't even know what happened. I hadn't even figured out the rules yet and it was gone, right? And I think risk kind of is like that, isn't it?
It is.
And when you're thinking about risk, it's the appetite that you have for risk is part of it.
That's a feeling.
That's a feeling, you know, that's your appetite. And then you have your capacity. Right? You have how much you can afford to take and risk. And those things sometimes don't line up for families. You know, if you, let's say you have, you know, a $2,000 a month income coming in and you want to buy $1 million house, well, you probably can't afford that. So you need to understand those things as you're moving through and deciding how much risk you're going to take with your nest egg that you've saved.
What have you seen about these terms that are thrown around about who I am as a risk taker, Tom? What
I've seen is we give everyone that comes to us that's a prospect, we give them a risk analysis. And it's a little analysis. They go through a quiz. We don't want to call it an exam.
It's like an eye exam kind of.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's like I can see it or I can't.
Yeah.
And they can answer a few questions, and I think up to 17 simple questions, and it comes out with a risk score. I've been using that for like 6 years, and I've had one client tell me they thought it was wrong. And after a year of being our client, they came back and they said, no, I think you're right. Now, why do we use that? That's that internal risk tolerance that somebody has. But then we also do an analysis of their portfolio and what they're invested in. I recently had a lady, I think she's 73 or 74, and her risk score, her tolerance was 34, and her broker had her at 88. Well, guess what? She's almost as risky as the market. She's loving the market when it's up, but what's she going to do when the market turns down? Risk is going to come back to haunt her because she's taking far too much risk for two things: for what she can tolerate, and she's taking far too much risk for what her portfolio can tolerate as well.
Does this become a timing thing, Kristen, depending on age, as to whether or not we should be adjusting what we believe we're tolerant for?
It is based on age, and I think it's based on two things, really. Age is part of it, and it's that affordability piece I talked about, because I'm thinking of a client we had come in, it's been a few years back now, and he did all his investing himself and was very, very aggressive, and he had saved over $3 million. So he had done a really good job for himself. He could afford the amount of risk he was taking. He was driving a race car, if you will, a Ferrari.
Yeah.
But what was funny about him was when he came into our office, you know, Greg sat down with him. Greg's our fiduciary, and he was his investment advisor, looking over his case. And he said, you know, you've done a really good job saving. You can afford to take the risk you're taking for how much money you're pulling out in your overall situation. This is okay. And he said, you know what? I'm just tired of driving the race car. I don't want to drive the race car anymore. I don't want that uneasy feeling every time the market drops. Even though I can afford to do it, I just don't really want to do it anymore.
Because this becomes a feeling test, Tom, when we start out about how we feel about where it is, does math still figure into quantifying the capacity better than the feelings ever can?
I think it's got to play hand in glove with that. I'm the old football coach. I'm thinking about the Atlanta Falcons in the Super Bowl about 5 years ago. They're 19 points ahead in the fourth quarter. There are a lot of our clients who are 19 points ahead retirement-wise in the fourth quarter. And what did the Falcons do? They kept throwing interceptions, fumbling the ball, running out of bounds, stopping the clock. And that dirty, dastardly Tom Brady brought the New England Patriots back, tied the game in the regular season, and won in regular game and won in overtime. There are a lot of our clients, Brad, that have the game won, but they're still playing retirement roulette. They're still out there at risk, and they I think it's because they've always done it that way in a 401k and forever for 40, 45 years, and they don't know how to do anything differently because they've always worked with a broker whose goal was just to make money. Making money is important, but preserving money
Yes.
is important in retirement, and you've
important.
got to address it.
So maybe this is your time to stop the game of roulette. Maybe it's time for a second opinion. Maybe it's time to assess the feelings and assess your capacity because the game has changed. Call the Wealth Council right now. We'll put together a plan that assesses all of that and make the game easy for you to win. Call the number, click the QR code, and the Wealth Council continues after this.
Are you preparing to make your retirement funds work for you while not taking too much risk? While there is no substitute for sitting down with an independent financial advisor, why don't you learn the strategies of investing as well? Call for your free retirement investing guide from the Wealth Council right now to learn about investment strategies that align with your goals. Call for your free retirement investing guide from the Wealth Council right now. 844-463-3466. That's 844-463-3466.
Well, how well have you planned? Do you even have a plan? Maybe it's time. I mean, you work for decades building wealth and hoping that what you did is going to last until your last breath. You know how to work. Did anyone train you how to retire? Call now. Claim your written financial plan and let the Wealth Council help you create a plan for retirement that you've always dreamed about. So call or click the QR code. You only get one shot at retirement. Let's get it right. Thanks for watching. I'm Brad Johansson. Until next time, it is the Council's wisdom. It's your wealth.